Well, I'm really excited about the baptisms this afternoon at 2 o'clock, and I'm under strict orders that at noon I'm to shut up. And we're going to spend 15 minutes praying for each other, and we'll be done by 12:15, okay? You're laughing at me, Jill. You're literally laughing at the possibility that that will happen. That's what I need. I need more challenge. All right. Okay, so slide two. We are going to carry on with this Armor of God series that we are engaged in. We did the first 2 weeks in our August get-togethers, which we had never done before, and we had a great group each week, so that was great. We talked about what it means to stand, because that's Paul's initial challenge to us, and then we talked about the belt of truth. We talked about the belt of truth this last week. This week, we're going to talk about the shoes from the gospel of peace, or as our youth call them, the sliders of shalom. Okay? Now, what I've got here are some authentic Roman soldier sandals. And if you'll notice, they've got studs on the bottom. I'm going to pass these around so you guys can have a little look-see. These are actually historically accurate, and they smell of leather. Nice. But these are, of course, hammered down, and they're flat, but they wouldn't have been for the Roman legionaries that wore them and used them. So pass that one that side, and here you go, Tim. Pass this one on this side. Have a little look-see at that. There's no rush. You don't have to quickly pass it on. But this is what Paul's talking about this morning as we read. If you have a Bible or if you have a phone, I want to encourage you to flip over to Ephesians chapter 6. It's going to be up there, but it's always great to be looking at it in your own stuff, okay? So Ephesians 6, starting in verse 10. Let's crack on. Finally, be strengthened in the Lord and in the strength of His power. Clothe yourselves with the full armor of God so that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world rulers of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavens. For this reason, take up the full armor of God so that you may be able to stand against on the evil day. And having done everything, to stand. It's a big deal to Paul. Verse 14. Stand firm, therefore, having bound up your loins with truth, by putting on the breastplate of righteousness. Now, Abigail's going to deal with that one in 2 weeks' time, on the 21st. And here's the one we're going to jump on today. Verse 15. And having fitted your feet with the readiness that comes from the good news of peace. So these little sandals that I'm passing around are the illusion that Paul's making here, even though he never mentions the word shoes or sandals. He is making a reference to the armor of God, and so their minds would have gone to the legionaries that are all around them every day and the shoes they wear. And they're very particular, my friends. Fitting your feet, or having fitted your feet. So this all flows from, stand firm, therefore, having fitted your feet with the readiness that comes from the good news of peace. Standing is a very big deal, and the armor is how you do it. These sandals would have been issued because the Roman army was not the first professional army that was professionally and centrally equipped, but it was certainly the best at its time in history. It was the largest and the best. Military service was a profession for some Romans. They could choose it, and it was a respectable profession. It wasn't just something that you pulled people from the farms in to fight when necessary. There were legionaries, that was their career. And so they would have been provided with the best shoes for fighting. Now remember, we're talking about Rome. We're talking about the Middle East. We're talking about Mediterranean climates. So thus sandals rather than boots are very relevant. In some of the pictures that you look at, they've got socks underneath the sandals because they started to move up more into Germania, and that was a little bit chillier than Italy was. But on a daily basis, a Roman soldier was expected to be able to march 20 miles without blinking an eye. Just 20 miles every day. Now, at the end of this 20-mile march as well, they then set up camp. And when you set up camp for a Roman legion, what you would do is you would construct a temporary fortification, complete with a defensive ditch around the entire perimeter and stakes, or a wall of stakes inside this ditch. So every night they stopped the camp. Around the camped army would be this kind of construction. That's a long day. You reckon? Yeah? That's a long day. And so one's feet gets tired. So he's talking about a very useful bit of kit. And Paul's saying, you need to fit your feet with these specially made shoes that will help you. And he describes them this way: having fitted your feet with the readiness that comes from the good news of peace. A lot of times I've had it described to me, or actually I flipped around on some sermons on this topic on YouTube, and it's gospel shoes, right? But actually it's not. It's readiness shoes. Your shoes don't represent the gospel. They represent the readiness that the gospel produces. Well, what's Paul getting at there? It's really important that you focus on what he's saying, because it's a different thing than what I've heard some people preach this subject on. Having fitted your feet with the readiness that comes from the good news of peace. Now, the gospel's very relevant. That's that word, good news. That's what that means, gospel. Right? Gospel, good news. Just interchange those. But that gospel produces a readiness in us. So the shoes are readiness, or let me give you another word, vigilance. It's not the gospel. The shoes are not the gospel. They're what the gospel produces in us. And we'll get to that in a second. Readiness means preparation in the active sense of making ready. All right, so when we came from our summer holidays, and those of you who have children had to get them ready to go to school, was there that one child that always lags behind? Was there that one child, or for those of you who are past child-rearing days, or are currently a part of a family and one of those going off to school, there's always that one child that kind of like takes forever. And, oh, I need another wee. Oh, wait, you have different socks on. What are you doing? Oh, I couldn't find any. And then, you know what I mean? It's like, where are your shoes? I don't know. Okay, so when you're trying to get out of the house with kids, readiness is a very important element, right? And I used to always, I'd get so fed up, I'd just go out and sit in the car. And my wife would be so bitter about this. She still is. But it's just kind of like, all right, I've done my best. I'll be in the car. So, readiness, a state of preparation, whether external or internal, all right? Another way to think of this word readiness is in the sense, again, we're going back to the army metaphor, and we're not celebrating military stuff here. This is what Paul's using. Paul's using this metaphor. That's why we're coming back to it. Think of it in terms of mobilizing an army. In wartime, there's people who are weekend warriors, right? Who get a few extra quid by serving in the reserve. I don't know if we have any reservists here, but when things start to kick off, who are the first people to get the call? The reservists. And they are activated. They are mobilized. They have to report to their base. They are now on their game. It is happening. It's not just a weekend thing I'm doing on the side of my mind. I am now a full-time soldier. I was a school teacher who does a reservist role to bring in extra money. But now I'm a soldier. That's who I am. This is what mobilization looks like. And if you've been following the news around the Ukraine tragedy, you would see that Putin has had to over and over again do another mobilization, because he keeps running out of soldiers and he keeps having to do more mobilizations to get more soldiers activated. See, this is the idea that Paul's using when he's talking about the thing that you're fitting your feet with. It's this mobilization. It's this activation. Okay? One preacher talked about how when he was serving, and he had served in one of the wars in the middle of the 20th century, they were so close to the enemy front lines that their commanders told them, don't take your boots off at night. You need to literally sleep with your boots on, because the enemy is so close. If something happens, you need to be able to get out of your tent and get moving ASAP. Yeah? This is the image Paul is talking about when he uses this word readiness. You got me? So as a church of Jesus Christ in the West, how would you say we're doing in terms of our readiness, our mobilization? Don't say it out loud. I'm asking you to think thoughts. Okay? You can go down a lot of little geek holes in studying this material, and I found lots of literature on force readiness. There's one thing, it's called ACE. Let me see what it's Agile Combat Employment Scheme. And this is like, there's a whole essay written about how to organize your, group in the military so that it is mobilized as quickly as possible. And there's a whole bunch of ideas around it. And I'll just give you 4. First of all, it's personnel. You need to have enough people mobilized. Second of all, they have to be trained. And third of all, they have to be equipped, which means they need to be given the equipment to use to do the things you've trained them for. And finally, you need to have the leaders developed so that they're able to lead those who are trained and equipped into the conflict. Where perhaps are we weak? Is our personnel a bit low? If we looked at our mobilization as a church, our readiness, would we say that we are ready, that we are prepared, that we are mobilized, that we are activated? Are we trained for that? Or are we going into it just with wishful thinking? Are we equipped? Do we have the equipment we need to do what we've been trained to do? And are our leaders competent? Have they been developed? Are they honest about where they're weak? I don't know about that last one. It's really dodgy. You see, here's the thing, guys. In a situation where Paul's calling us to be mobilized, we live in a culture that seeks to do the exact opposite. You see, if I were to be asked the question, what's our mobilization like? I would say actually on the sleepy side. One of the things that is on my heart and my prayer for myself consistently is the prayer, Lord, awaken me. Awaken me. I'm so sleepy. I'm so easily drifting into distractions. And it's nap time. I think the church in the West is asleep. But the world seeks to get us into that situation, and we live in a real world, and it seeks to numb us. To numb us. Are there areas where it's numbed you? where you can watch things now and it doesn't break your heart where maybe years ago it did? Because you've just watched enough of it? What about distract you? What are the distractions that are being deployed against you? Because the distractions are just as powerful as the numbing. And it impedes our readiness. It impedes our mobilization. I have an issue with television. I always have in my whole life. If I sit down for an evening and I flip on something, I could spend hours there. Wow, where did the evening go? Now, sometimes that's a really good thing. And it's something that I value and appreciate and I'm grateful for. And then there's a point when it's just numbing me and distracting me. And it impedes my mobilization. I don't know what yours is. Or it entertains us. That's the ultimate value in our culture. That's the ultimate thing that comes against us in our mobilization. Because our culture, the ultimate good is to be entertained. If you aren't entertaining, then you quickly lose crowds. As I look into very drowsy faces. Entertainment is the chief value. If you aren't entertaining, in fact, we will tolerate a lack of integrity, cruelness, bad policy from people in the public eye if they're entertaining. And I don't need to name names. The world seeks to numb us, to distract us, to entertain us, make you anything but ready. Jesus speaks to us and asks us to mobilize, to sleep with our boots on. My mind often goes to first responders that have to live a different kind of life. So my brother-in-law is a part of the Kent Police. He's been for many years. He's an ACC, an assistant chief constable now. But when he was just a sergeant, I remember when we had first moved to Britain, we went out to dinner with him and his wife and my wife are sisters. And we were driving home from dinner. And do you know that is it Reams Way, that bit from Westgate Towers to Aldi? Is that bit, that little narrow bit where there's houses on either side? It's kind of skinny. It's closed right now because of all the construction. I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, we were driving down that road, and all of a sudden something, I can't remember what an object went flying through the window of one of the front doors into the middle of the road. And what my brother-in-law did, he was driving, he stopped the car, put on his hazards, and he got out. And he had to go check out what was going in the situation. And I'm like, well, that's kind of dramatic. All you had to do was turn right and go around it. Only to learn that he is legally bound to engage with a disruption as a police officer. He's never off duty. If something happens, he has to engage with it. And so he went and he did, it was very cool looking. He slid along the side of the building and kind of looked inside the door, what's going on, right? And it turned out to be just a domestic. And people were coming to be on scene. Then he had to go and write in his notebook what he had done, because his notebook would have been looked at by his superiors. He was never off duty. It was fascinating to me. Little California boy visiting Britain. Our first responders live a different kind of life. You know what I mean? When you're a fireman and you're on shift, you aren't just going to work. You know what I mean? It's like any second, life and death might come right through that siren going off in the station. It's a different kind of life. And this is the life Jesus is calling us to. And yet the culture around us is saying, no, let us numb you. No, let us distract you. No, let us entertain you. And can I say that in large part it succeeded? And that's why it's so hard to be mobilized in the Western church. And if I'm going to say anything to us this morning that you're going to remember, I want to challenge you that the normal life in Western society is not to be your life as a follower of Jesus. It's not normal for you. It's compromise. The normal life for the normal Westerner is a life of compromise for the followers of Jesus. And some of us have to ask deep questions about our lifestyles. Because every context we go into, we're on duty. And here's the amazing thing. God's there ahead of you. And he's going, I've created all the things we need for this moment. And here's my guy, or here's my gal. She's coming in. He's coming in right at the moment. Oh, wait. Their phone just gave them something to do to distract them. Ouch. Paul then says this. He says, this readiness, it comes from the gospel of peace. So, how are we changed? How are we mobilized? How are we awoken? This is the question I hope you're asking yourself. Well, how do I get there? Because, Jim, you got me spot on. And I'm holding up my hand and saying, it gets me too. The good thing about this series is that I get to spend so much, actually, every sermon, I get to preach to myself the whole week ahead of time. Okay, so I'm not coming to you as an expert. I'm coming to you as someone who has been literally battered by this truth this week and has had to do some repenting. Paul says, if you want to become ready and you're not, there's one way to get there. It's the gospel. It's the gospel. Now, back in the summer, Sadie had a dream about the armor of God. And it was really interesting because I had just preached on it. I think was it June or July, Sadie? Yeah, it was July. And then we said, okay, Sadie, ask God what you mean, what he means. And so she had another dream. And the dream had us with boots on, but there was a bunch of black goo, and we were slipping, sliding all over the place. How to get there, how to get there. If you notice those sandals, they have those studs underneath. And the reason is to give you grip in difficult situations. And when the enemy's pushing against you, you can anchor in and you're stable to push back. You can't be pushed, but you can push forward. You have traction going uphill or going downhill because these sandals are designed to enable you to move forward and to inhibit you moving backward. That's what the enemy wants to do to us. You're in a war zone. This is called the Armor of God series. Why do you wear armor? Because you're in a battlefield. And that's the real life. So many of us are surprised when we experience the consequences of a battlefield because we fail to recognize that the teaching of the Bible is so utterly clear that that's exactly where you're standing. And so he says this, he says the way you are activated, the way you are mobilized is through the gospel of peace. What he's saying is this is slide 5. The good news does something to you. To you. The gospel will never leave you the same if you've heard it. If it has not changed you, I would just offer this as a bit of sensitive, humble advice. Just make sure that you've genuinely opened your life to it. Because if you open the door, it comes in and changes the furniture. And if it hasn't, I'm not so sure. It might still be on the porch. There's a phrase I want you to learn. Just 2 words. And it's gospel formation. Gospel formation. Remember, gospel means good news. They're interchangeable. So the message of the Christian faith is good news. The gospel. And that is meant to form us as Jesus followers. You are meant to be a different shape because the gospel's in your life. Gospel formation. But my question to you this morning is this, my friends. Is your gospel good enough? Slide 11. Is your gospel good enough? Is your gospel big enough? It's the gospel of peace. The gospel of peace, he says. He's referencing the whole gospel, but it's interesting how he's emphasizing the aspect of peace in the middle of a battlefield. You're meant to experience a different reality in the middle of this tumultuous world in which we live. And that is meant to be mind-blowing for you and those around you. Let me say that again. You are meant to experience a different reality in the middle of a battlefield. And that is meant to be mind-blowing for you and those around you. It's not about you. It's what he does in us. Let me read this to you. This is Philippians 4:7. It's not up there. And Paul's saying here what will happen. And we're going to talk more about this next week. I want to really hone in on this aspect of the gospel of peace next week. But what he says here is this. Then you will experience God's peace. And I want you to hear this next bit. Which exceeds anything we can understand. If I were to ask most people, how can you experience peace? When I would really get down to brass tacks, I think what I'd probably hear is my circumstances have changed and life has gotten easier. But Paul describes peace as something the complete opposite of that. In the middle of the battlefield, you experience something that's so mind-blowing, you can't even understand it. I don't know why I'm at peace. I'm experiencing something I haven't earned, I haven't worked up, I haven't developed, I haven't done 3 steps. It's just real. That's the gospel of peace. It's mind-blowing. And you know what? It's why we read these stories of these heroes of the faith who are in prison or who are enduring persecution and who don't bogart. They don't quit because they've experienced the provision of God in that situation. And we avoid so much because we don't know if that peace is real or not. My friends, do you remember when you were a first Christian? For those of you who were Jesus followers, do you remember those heady first days? Do you remember how in love you were? Do you remember that? Do you remember how your mind was blown about how reality looked different when Jesus had come into the room than it did before? That certain things bothered you that didn't bother you before? Do you remember those days? In Revelation chapter 2, verses 4 and 5, John is writing for Jesus to the churches, and he's writing to the first church, which is the church in Ephesus, and Jesus says this, as John writes it down, to the church at Ephesus, but I have this charge against you, that you have left your first love. This is what Paul is saying about the gospel, creating a mobilization in our lives. You've lost your first love. The gospel's meant to produce a first love in you and in me that doesn't go away. It's not just the heady days of idealism at the beginning. This is the normal Christian life. Gospel formation keeps us in a state of mind being blown. He says this, I have this charge against you that you have left your first love. You have lost the depth of love that you first had for me. So remember the heights from which you have fallen and repent, which means to change your inner self, your old way of thinking, your behavior, and seek God's way and do the works you did at first. It's one of the harshest rebukes in the 7 letters in Revelation. And actually, they've been doing a lot of stuff right. The paragraph before, he's saying, you guys are awesome. You're doing really good stuff. However, I have this against you. You've lost your first love. He's not as interested in the stuff you're doing and is in the heart. You have beating in your chest. Is it sleepy? Is your heart sleepy? Is your heart distracted? Is your heart overly entertained? Is it numb? What Paul's telling us here is that these shoes that give us the ability to stand stable in a battlefield is a sense of being ready, mobilized, on duty that comes from realizing the miracle of the good news of Jesus. All right, 6 minutes. I want to bring it into land early. I'm just going to close with this. I had this prepared for this morning. I used it yesterday in Anthony and Rachel's little homily in their vow rededication. But I was listening to an astronomer on YouTube this week, and he's one of those really famous British ones that is media savvy. Does anyone know who I'm talking about? He's got kind of a Manchester haircut like Oasis. What? That's it, Brian Cox, okay? I want you to picture his very nasal tone as I'm reading this to you, okay? Here's a thought that might keep you up at night. Every star you see in the night sky is a sun. Some are hundreds of times larger than our sun. Some are smaller. But nearly all of them have planets, not just one or two, but entire solar systems, just like ours, orbiting, spinning, and waiting. And here's the staggering part. The closest star to us after the sun is Proxima Centauri. You all knew that, right? It's over 4 light years away. Even if you could travel at the speed of light, which we cannot, it would still take 4 years to reach it. Most stars you see, they're thousands of light years away. Some are tens of thousands. You're not just looking into space. You're looking deep into time when you see some of these stars. Some of the light hitting your eyes tonight left its stars before humans existed. You're seeing the past, not metaphorically, literally. And he closes with this. And the most mind-blowing fact, if that hasn't already blown what remains of your mind, is that there are more stars in the universe than grains of sand on every beach on earth. All with their own solar systems. More planets than you could ever count. Why the veer into astronomy, Jim? It's this. The God, hold on one sec. I want to be able to focus. The God who with a word created that universe, loved you so much as you were trapped in your rebellion against him, when you deserved none of it. Loved you so much, loved me so much, when we were spitting in his face, that he took the form of a puny little human that can't even comprehend what I just read. I can't comprehend the idea of a light year, let alone what I just read. Took the form of a human and died with all of the ick and rebellion and rage and unforgiveness of my life and every person in human history upon him, so that he could get us back. Have you grown numb to that? It's time to repent. It's time to say, oh my gosh, I have become over-familiar with the most amazing story that has ever been told. And that's why I don't bother telling my friends about it, because I wouldn't bother telling me, because it's just, yeah, I've heard it all before. This is incredible. And it is whispering to you this morning in the person of the Holy Spirit, saying, will you let me wake you up with my good news? Will you let it invade your life to every nook and cranny so that you become mobilized and ready in the middle of this battlefield, so that you're no longer victimized, but you actually become dangerous to the darkness? Do you hear me, people? Is this landing? Is this going in? I just think one of the things that we're going to do during this ministry time is that we're going to ask Jesus to reawaken us to the gospel. I know that's one word that I have. Tim, come on up. Stand up with me, guys. We're just going to invite the Holy Spirit, and we're going to crack on, okay?